couple others, but nobody seemed to think I had any talent. They're going to be so sorry when this thing pays off in comedy.
We should have had her. We could have had her. You was that your first? You sang first before you did comedy? Is that kind of your thing? Or do you sing in your comedy? I'm not sure.
I do. I start off with a song and I end with a song when I'm really on a stage.
Okay.
I start off with "I'm the Great Pretender" and I end with it.
Nice. I wish I could sing. I was in a band in high school and we played some car shows, but I don't know. I always wanted to be a musician, but I felt like the discipline to be a musician is just enormous. And if you don't do that, then you end up telling dick jokes in comedy clubs.
You know, I got to say to all the people tuning in, and this is from my heart, I'd say it if we weren't live, but even better when we are. You are a brilliant comedian.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, I love your style of comedy. Today at Comic Spot, we have this gentleman here today, and his name is Dustin Chafin.
Yes.
Now, if you don't know him yet, you might remember him from his credits. You can't read my writing, so I'll say it. White Boys in the Hood.
What? Well,
Oh
you couldn't do that show right now. It was white comics doing black jokes in front of black crowds. I mean, they would cancel you on the way to the stage. Like, there's no way. That would be canceled immediately in 2020. That was a lot of fun, though. We had a good time on that show. It was like Adam Hunter and Greg Wilson, a bunch of us. The idea was fun because I think a lot of us came up through, black and urban nights and Latino shows. And so, we were the guys that could kind of like break those crowds when a lot of the other kind of white comedians would have a tough time. There was some of us that kind of came up through those rooms. So it's cool they did the show. But like I said, there's no way you could do it now. Go ahead.
I was booked on this show, and I was told it was for an urban audience. When I got there, it was a bunch of white people acting like pimps and hoes, and I was like, and you're not in blackface. Good for you. And it was the craziest. And I thought, well, the only joke I could get out of it was, I thought this was an urban audience that looks more like Keith Urban. I'm out of here. I was so disappointed because I love a black audience.
Sure. Well, black people just know how to have fun. I feel white people forgot how to do that or something. It's like, the sensitivity is usually not there with the black crowd. There's they enjoy the night too. It's like they make it an event. They're into it. They're dressed up. They're having fun. White people are just a drag sometimes. So black people have a tendency to just make more of a party out of comedy, and it's a big deal. And if you get a laugh from a black audience, it's it means more. It's like 10 white people's laugh. You know what I mean?
It is. I love that. We now have a type of currency where we're exchanging it 10 for 1.
Exactly. I like it. The new Bitcoin.
Yes.
Like people's laughter.
Talk to me about why am I still single? Because I say that on my post. I'll do a selfie, and then I'll say, why am I still single? Tell me about your why am I?
That was a show we did. It was on VH1, and I wasn't that familiar with the show. Apparently, it was some they would pick these train wrecks and they would put them on this show, and they would kind of follow them around dating, and then they just some of these people were just during the dates they would have meltdowns or just yell at people or whatever. So this person, particularly on this show that we did, she was a nightmare, and she was mean to all the guys she dated or went out with. And so the producers decided to do a roast of her with New York City comedians. And so they took her to like a comedy venue, and then there were about 7 or 8 of us, and we just roasted this person, like as comedians do. And it was not actually a good experience because she just like fired back, and she had freaking out on us and who are you to make fun of me. Just,
Oh.
it was like a Jerry Springer thing, and she's like yelling and cursing, and we were just like, we just needed a couple of bucks to do jokes. Like don't take it personally, it was like a thing. She really flipped out. But yeah, that's kind of what that was just kind of a, roasting this nightmare dating thing. So it was fun though. That's the thing. Comedy is always a weird experience. There's always some thing that you would never do in your regular, if you had a regular life in a cubicle and just working for the man, you would never have these crazy experiences. And so that's one of mine, just, roasting somebody who was, a little mentally unstable.
I qualify. That would be hilarious. I would pay people to roast me.
Yeah, dude, really, I get a little sensitive. I feel like, people are always like, you're a comedian, you could take a joke. And I'm like, not really. I can tell them, but taking them is, and I don't really, I don't, I feel like the whole roasting thing kind of, it's popular now, like the past couple of years, Jeff Ross and LA, especially, kind of that whole thing. But yeah, I'm not a big roast guy in the sense of like other comedians. I get a little weird because sometimes those things get mean. They really, they go after like family members and like tragedies and just like, mom just died. You're like, come on, dude. Yeah. I get too defensive. I can't take that stuff. But I can, say it to a lady that, is mean to people on other dates. But other comedians I get weird with.
I would rather people make fun of me than make fun of any one person ever.
Yeah, you're a better person than me. I don't like it.
Like, we would make a good duo. I could be your straight, and you could roast.
I like it. Yeah.
I like anything if it's well written. I just don't like the hack stuff out.
Yeah, well written. Yeah, absolutely. I've actually written for some roast and done some stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, if it's there's definitely clever jokes, and that's the thing. And you watch a lot of roast, things, and some of the best material comes out of the roast. A good friend of mine, he passed a few years ago. Greg Giraldo was, an amazing roaster. And like the way he would write his jokes and in these roasts were just phenomenal. They were just these perfect jokes and you wouldn't hear him anywhere else but a roast. And it was great. Like I really miss him in those roasts that they have every year because he was like one of the best. But yeah, a lot of times those jokes, they're so tight and perfect and, but I still don't like them geared at me. So be nice to me.
What's your favorite joke that you ever wrote for or said at a roast that you just still crack yourself up that you thought of it?
Well, the last that I wrote, like I said, I haven't done a lot of roast. I wrote a thing that was, I don't know if it was a roast. It was like, I did and I won't even probably remember the material, but I wrote for Bob Balaban, who's part of those Christopher Guest movies. He played like the psychiatrist in Best in Show. He's like in all the Christopher Guests, all those parody movies that he does. And he had a thing that was in the Hamptons, and it was kind of a light roast for Dick Cavett, who's the legend. And so I was writing stuff for him, and I really don't remember a lot of the material that I wrote. But at the time, Charlie Sheen was like a big deal. So it was a lot of Tiger Blood jokes. And the idea of somebody doing Tiger Blood jokes at the expense of Dick Cavett, who's the legend of our time, it's just unreal to me to like, but yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that. A little on the spot with material. I have a bad memory. I did a lot of drugs in the 90s.
That's okay. When I did research on Sinbad, there was so much research. And right off of his bio, I got a joke. A joke came to me. Because it said he had been married to a Meredith, and then he'd been married to a Meredith. And when I looked it up, it was say Meredith, right? Oh, man. This is a cheap shot, but I'm going to go for it. And so when I opened up, I said, I saw on your bio that you were married to a Meredith, and then you were married to a Meredith. Nice. And I also saw your net worth is $7 million, and you weren't married to Meredith Vieira.
That's nice.
Yeah, that was fun. So you were on Crashing. Talk to me about.
I was. Crashing was that was a fun experience. It was you know, the Pete Holmes was somebody that I kind of I winged a little bit as a young comic, and we worked at the Boston Comedy Club in New York, which is always that was always a weird thing. It was like, you know, people would just go by the Boston Comedy Club in New York and be like, Red Sox suck, and we're like, this has nothing to do with baseball. So it was like this funny Boston Comedy Club in the middle of the Village in Manhattan, New York, and people would just go crazy about that. But it was, you know, it was Barry Katz. He moved, you know, he had a comedy scene in Boston and moved it to New York, and so I was in charge of that. Actually, the last 3 years I ran it and was a comedian and manager there and everything. And so, you know, I had people like Pete Holmes and Nate Bargatze and Jimmy Kilstein. A lot of these guys they would bark for me. We would have shows, and you know, they would try to get people in, and they would get stage time, you know, when they brought people in, that kind of thing. And so Pete Holmes was one of those guys that you know, I kind of believed in and kind of worked with, and so we were buddies. And you know, it was kind of a you know, just kind of a mentor kind of thing, and I helped him out and got him a lot of his first headlining stuff. And so yeah, it was kind of, we had that relationship. And then it kind of, you know, he went on his way and I went on my way, and he was in LA for a long time and just kind of doing his thing. And then this show came out, and it's funny because this is an interesting angle to go about this. But you know, so this show comes out, and everybody's telling me about it. They're like, oh my gosh, Pete Holmes, you know, you should get on the show, whatever. And it's like, yeah, you know, well, it's, you know, I don't know how that works, but yeah, sure. And then I remember he called me, and we had me come down to see the set because they redid the Boston Comedy Club. He goes, you got to see this thing. And I was like, whatever. I was on set with Apatow and everything. And so that was it. That was really the extent of it. I was just kind of on set. And then I kind of went on my way, and then these shows started happening, and I was like, and then all my friends started getting on them. And I remember, you know, like I would just be on the subway, and one of my friends, like Marina Franklin, got on. She's like, oh yeah, I just did this. I just filmed Crashing. And I was like, really? That's cool. And then she's like, you should get on there. I was like, you know what? I would love to be on, but nobody's asked me. All right. So I was on the set, but he didn't ask me to be on it. And so I kept kind of like going and going. And then Joey Gay, I think he like came into a green room and was like, I just did Crashing. I was like, okay, I can't take this anymore. And then my therapist is always like, you have to ask people for things. You can't just sit there and think they're going to give it to you just because you deserve it or you were good to them. It doesn't matter. So I remember I reached out to Pete Holmes, and I was like, look, I go, I don't want to be that guy, because I'm always weird about asking for things in comedy. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy, but if anything comes up where you need a comic to play a comic and mess around, whatever, I would love to have anything to do with the show, extra, whatever, it doesn't matter. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And then 2 weeks go by, and he reaches out to me. He's like, hey, we have you for this script. Do you not want to do it? I go, what are you talking about? And apparently they emailed my AOL account, so the agencies, and I never got the email. So they were waiting on me thinking that I didn't want to do it. So I had to, you know, one of those emails you have where it's like just thousands of emails, the junk mail. It got lost in that, and it's this whole thing. And but anyway, I ended up like, you know, they let me do it, and it was just like it was a great experience. It was the first time I had a trailer, and I got to, you know, they costumed me, and like it was my first kind of experience with that, with a real TV experience, and it was great. And I got to play myself, which I'm pretty good at that, and got to do my own stand up, and it was funny because, you know, I do crowd work sometimes when I do, you know, stand up in a club, and they set it up where it's kind of like a small club. And then I kept kind of asking questions to the audience, and then they stopped me and said, look, they can't talk to you because they're extras, and if they talk, we have to pay them more. Just do your act. And I was like, oh, okay.
You get them all to talk.
I was trying to be organic, you know, like a real set. And they're like, no, dummy, just do. We'll have to pay them under $5. Like, just shut up. Just do your thing. So it was really funny. And you know, I worked TJ Miller, one of my buddies. He was on the set. He's a good buddy now. And we had a good time, and it was great. You know, it was fun. And I thought it was a cool experience, you know, for people that were always wondering what the New York City scene was like. It captured a little bit of that, kind of an eye-opening of people paying dues. And it was a little bit of our history and kind of what happened. And, you know, so to see that come out, you know, on HBO was great, and to be a part of it was definitely an honor. So yeah, it was definitely a funny thing. But it goes to show you got to check your email and ask for things.
Yes. And make sure your dial-up is still working.
Exactly. That's how old you know you are, is when you have an AOL account that's still active.
So, talk to me about when you were a little kid. Were you obedient, and then all of a sudden you went off the rails and started being funny and that guy?
I don't, this is an interesting one because I wonder how you answer the question, because I was always kind of a shy kid, kind of, a little bit of an introvert, a weird life though, like my parents were strange. Like, they put me into boxing when I was 5, and, like just stuff like that. Like I always say, that's a lazy way of beating your kid when you put your kids into boxing,
My dad was a boxing promoter.
Oh, really?
So keep talking.
Oh,
You're
it's funny. My parents tried that and they lost a lot of money, but they tried it though. They tried to make my mom the face of the whole thing because there was no female fight promoters, and so she was going to be the like the hot Don King kind of thing, and it fell apart. It was in Texas, TKO Productions, the whole. Like, we can go down that road one day. That's great. Yeah, boxing. So our whole family boxed. I was Golden Gloves, like the whole thing. So yeah, well, yeah. And my first laugh was off of boxing. I remember it was my first fight. I was 5 years old. Back then, the 70s, the kids didn't wear headgear. Like, they didn't give a shit about kids back then. Like, kids weren't popular yet. You know what I mean? So nobody was worrying about safety. And so I remember my first boxing match, I boxed this kid. I think I beat him. He was a little smaller than me. And then after the fight, the referee goes to take us, motion us to the ring. And I don't know what's happening yet. And so I have my gloves off. And I just start hitting this kid again. And so, like, with no gloves, and he's bleeding, the whole thing. And then the, auditorium or gymnasium or whatever, they just go crazy laughing. They're just laughing hysterical. And I've been chasing that life ever since. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that was my first taste of it. So yeah. And, and it was funny. I was kind of a hometown celebrity in Wichita Falls, Texas. They would put me on the news. They would have they had the sports intro for the commercial was like Muhammad Ali on one side and it was me on the other. They'd be like, the greatest to the next greats. And so, I was walking around, never had to buy a Shirley Temple, and, just it was like signing autographs at age 6, So that was my childhood, early on. And it was kind of, I peaked at 6, I think, is what's wrong with me. That's why I don't want to age gracefully, because I just I know what it's like to feel young. So yeah, so all that was kind of the beginnings of it, and then after that, it kind of just became a regular kid, a little not a class clown at all, but always different. Like I always dressed different, always kind of looked different, and like acted like I was I grew up in Texas, and I was kind of like, just an oddball. Like it didn't feel right. Like I needed to get to a place like New York City because, there was just too many people that weren't, understanding me and my artistic endeavors and stuff. And so it was kind of that stuff. And the funny thing was, like, I don't even know how, I mean, my whole family's funny. They're ridiculous, and, some of them been to jail, but they're still funny.
TKO Productions says it all.
But yeah, so I think a little bit of that. My dad was a good storyteller, and my mom was funny and sarcastic, and my brothers are ridiculous, and so it was always funny. Like we were always drawn to funny things, like our Christmas movie is Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase, or we put a squirrel in the tree to kind of for that, like stuff like that. We're just sarcastic and crazy, and so but at the comedy thing, I don't know. I didn't get into comedy because I thought it was funny. I think I got into comedy because I just was attracted to what it was and kind of the rock star element to it, the lifestyle. Sam Kinison was a big, comedian that I loved as a kid, and Rodney Dangerfield and stuff like that, and George Carlin, and those guys, had kind of this rock appeal to them. And so I think I loved the idea of that you could just get up and treat comedy like music and kind of have like this cult following through it. And I don't know, and you could dress the way you wanted and act the way and say whatever you want. Like it always felt like comics were just the ones that could do really whatever they wanted. And so, but I got to New York City, and through art school, I thought I was just going to be an artist or a fashion designer. I had no idea. I went to Parsons in New York, and I ended up being a busboy to comedy club. And next thing you're on stage, you put the broom down and you're, telling jokes. And so that's kind of the short version of it. But, like I said, I wasn't like a class clown. I was kind of more the quiet kid that was drawing little cartoons on the back of people's papers and stuff. But, you never know how you find this thing.
What's the kindest thing someone said to you early on to keep you going on stage and putting the broom down?
Wow, that's a good one. Kindest thing. I don't know. I mean, it's comics, so it's never really that kind.
What about a club? Totally. What about a club owner?
Even worse.
It's hard to get a compliment out of a narcissist. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Why do we try?
Yeah, I guess, people just saying I'm a good writer, or people it was little things, just people saying I'm hard to follow, or people calling me a beast, or people, complimenting a joke, or, it was the little things, nothing specific. I can totally remember there was one thing, but just, whenever you would have like a veteran comic that would take you on the road because they saw a set and thought you were funny, or, and in comedy, it's a weird thing too. It's a double-edged sword. Sometimes people will steal your joke, and that's the compliment.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh.
So there's a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, there were quite a few people that were kind to me. Jim Mendrinos was kind to me. I don't know if you know who that is, but
I know the name.
He's been around a while. DC Benny, sweetheart.
DC,
Yeah.
I was out barking in Greenwich Village, right?
Okay.
And a limo pulled up in those little streets of Greenwich Village. And out comes him and Ryan Reese.
Hilarious.
And Ryan's not that talkative, but DC Benny stood in the freezing cold to encourage me as a baby comic.
Nice.
He stood there for like 10 minutes.
Oh, that's great.
I'll never forget.
He's a sweetheart. He's such a good dude. And yeah, he was encouraging. And so, yeah, there was definitely a few people, but then there was people, and then there wasn't a lot of that. And sometimes that's a good thing, because I see some comics who get a lot of love from like the comedy community, and, have people that, like a lot of people. I didn't open for a lot of people in the beginning. And so a lot of people didn't give me love on certain aspects. And so I had to figure it out myself. And I ended up kind of, running a lot of things because I felt like nobody was just going to give it to me. So if I wanted stage time, I had to find a room. I had to work at a club. I, manage a show, whatever. So that there was a lot of that happened that kind of, forced the work ethic on me, was to kind of like, you got to get stage time. Got to get stage time. No matter what the cost, just find a way to get on stage. And so by people not being kind to me, it kind of put a fire under me. And so I ended up running a bunch of things in New York and, that kind of thing.
I was in Portland, Oregon, and I'm old and white and straight, and, and the scene there is like not having me at all. I think every comedian in Portland started smoking when I went up on stage at an open mic. And it's just started me like digging deeper. It was the best gift you could get.
Yeah. It's, well, I never liked open mics. I always felt like I wasn't going to grow in an open mic. Like I had to figure out a way. That's why I was a cook. I was a busboy. I was a manager, whatever it took to get into the real shows at a comedy club. I did whatever it took. I cleaned the bathroom. It didn't matter to me. But cause I always feel open mics were, I don't know, it's hard to get any gauge on your material. It's a clique usually. People usually laugh at their buddies. They don't laugh at the new people. It's ageism. It's, it's all this weird shit. Like, there's definitely, I don't like any of that in an open mic. And sometimes you'll find an encouraging one. There's a few, where people, the comics are cool, but very far and few between. But so any young comics out there, it's like either change the vibe at the open mic and create a good mic for everybody, or just, pick up a mop or a telephone and work at a club.
Yes. That was the best thing that ever happened to me when I started working at Harvey's Comedy Club in Portland. And I would do anything they needed to have done. And then that's when they gave back to me. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, there's, I feel that's the best way to do it. It's like kind of in comedy, you have to start in the mailroom, if you will. And that's kind of part of it. Just, doing what it takes to work at a club and do whatever they need. And that's, yeah, that to me, that's the best way. Cause that's how you're going to, meet people. Cause the best thing in this business is who you meet and who you talk to and the comedians that you get to like hang out with and have these conversations with. And that's always freaks me out when you like, I see young comics go into a comedy club and they just go in the back and talk to their friends. Meanwhile, there's like all these veteran comedians with all this knowledge and all this experience. And, and I'm not saying annoy veteran comedians, but a lot of them are narcissists. So they love talking about themselves. So you'd be surprised. All you got to do is like, I like that last bit you did. And then they're your friend for life.
That's it. Use the same line on all of them.
Yeah. That closing thing you did was phenomenal. Meanwhile, you didn't even see it. But no, but you need to, it's just a thing that's like, if you want to be good, you need to be around good people and not just hang out in your open mic circle, So I don't know. That's what I always benefited from a club was that Dave Attell would come through and guys, Todd Barry's and guys, that were doing stuff and and Mark Maron, and they would talk to us because they knew what it was like to be young comics. And so, I don't know. I think that's kind of how it works. It's how you plant the seeds for the next generation and that whole thing recycles itself. But so definitely.
Harvey's would let me sit through all 7 shows every weekend. And I did that for a year straight, just absorbing. And I had one comedian who will go nameless that thought I was doing that to get material. Like, I got enough problems figuring out what I want to say and who am I. I don't need anybody. I just want to see what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah.
How you move on stage. How do you engage? There's so much more than the words coming out of your mouth.
Absolutely. I mean, you need to be a fan of comedy in order to be able to do it. And yeah, and you need to be a student of comedy. And it's like, and that's how you learn. And yeah, I mean, what's funny there is usually the headliner guys are the ones that end up stealing from the openers and stuff. So.
Thank you.
So it's like, I don't know who this guy is. We'll find him and roll him out because, yeah, it's like, shut up, man. It's like, you can't watch comedy and like, as a comedian, I mean, that's, you don't think musicians watch musicians? Like, that's what you do, It's like I go to a concert. There's like the balcony is full of all these musicians watching this other band. Like that's just how it works.
Exactly. What do you think about comics who steal from the dead? Let's go dark. I've heard more jokes from the legends that are not around to defend their own material anymore. I think that is so triple hack or something.
Triple hack. I like that. It's a new phrase now. Triple hack.
Triple hack.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's all horrible, I mean, I think sometimes, I think sometimes you can kind of reinvent something that is a little different, and there's comedians that I feel are inspired by, it'd be hard pressed to not say that Lewis Black isn't inspired by Sam Kinison or that Mitch Hedberg wasn't inspired by Stephen Wright or, it's Jim Jeffries is inspired by George Carlin or this guy. It's easy. I mean, and I think that's okay. It's okay to be inspired, by comedians and, people that are doing kind of a certain style of comedy. Cause I think ultimately, in comedy, we have our own personalities and sometimes other people have similar personalities on stage as well. And we talk about certain things that are similar. And cause we're all, there's only so many things that we can think of as humans. But yeah, but outright stealing, obviously bad. But, I mean, it's,
I had one comedian in Australia tell me so-and-so passed away and now I can use his material. And I'm like, where are your ethics?
I mean, there's idiots everywhere. So yeah, I mean, comedians and everybody, I mean, politics, they're everywhere. So it's like, unfortunately, somebody says something stupid like that. You just got to walk away from that person.
So what have you been doing during COVID? I understand you have a wonderful lady who is also accomplished in the comedy realm. And what have the two of you been doing to beat COVID with a stick? Not a broomstick, but
Yeah, it was rough when it first started. Obviously, I think a lot of us were trying to figure out, how long this is going to last. I feel, they were kept saying a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or a month or 2 months or, it kept kind of like, getting further and further out. I personally, started doing a lot of Zoom shows, a lot of Zoom type shows like Adam Hunter's show and this guy Ryan Callis and different places, and just started kind of doing a lot of sets online. And what's great about Zoom shows is the bar is so low because I mean, like if you're doing your A stuff on Zoom, you really need to check yourself, because the point of the Zoom is like you can fail, and most people are going to bomb on there anyway. So just write, keep writing, and do new stuff or write right before. And that's what I like about the Zoom shows. I mean, we've done the Adam show together, and it's so funny because you have the show, so you're like, all right, I got to write some jokes for this show, and so it forces you. Whereas regular shows and before COVID, it's like you sometimes we just do our act that works, that you've been doing a long time. You got your opener, you got your closer, you know how to do comedy, crowd work, blah, blah, blah. And so, it's kind of your act and it's there, as opposed to kind of this urgency to kind of generate content and material isn't there. So I felt like during this time, I really wrote a lot, and I started kind of accumulating a lot of material. And then I decided, you know what, it's like maybe I'll put something out online. I'll do like a Zoom album or something. And I started working with this guy on Comedy Hub on Twitch. And then I talked to my record label, Comedy Records, and they said, yeah, sure, try. I mean, they were skeptical because they were like a Zoom album. I mean, that might sound terrible. And so I did it with my buddy Anthony Caffrey, helped me produce it. But so I'm doing the Zoom album 2020. It comes out on 12/23 on the 23rd, and it's the only Zoom album of its kind. There's been one other Zoom album that was recorded with a group of people in a club, but this is people logged in from all over the world, from Brazil, Texas, whatever. So it's a real Zoom experience. And it was one of my best works, because I was like, I talked about the panic of what's happening in the world. And then I did a lot of personal stuff that, sometimes you don't have the courage to do a lot of like personal stuff sometimes in a comedy club per se, because, some drunk guys from Jersey, and you got to deal with this crap. You got to be quick. You got to set up punch. Like you don't have a lot of time to breathe on stage and tell a story and take your time. And so this was kind of one of those things where there was a lot of things I hadn't talked about in my first album that I wanted to, because I feel like sometimes my life is more interesting than my act. And so I tried to bring those elements to it. I grew up in a family strip club, and, it's like my dad, arrested trying to get his switchblades in Mexico. It was like our family vacation. Like there's, all kinds of crazy stuff that I should have been talking about, that I allowed myself to kind of like, let loose on this album. And I'm really proud of it. And it was a lot of fun. And I've just, it's kind of one of those things where you just got to try to do something and adapt to the element. And so that was one of those situations where, it's like, and I did it in my in-laws pottery studio here in the mountains of Maine, in the middle of nowhere. And it turned out great. And it sounds great. It doesn't sound like people are laughing like Darth Vader. Like it sounds like a real rich club experience. And it's going to be on Sirius XM, which was huge, because that was the goal, because I wanted to get an album out there on rotations, because I'm not going to be able to make as much money, touring and doing comedy clubs for a while. And so, I got it. That was the goal, and I got it there. So, it's going to dropping on the 23rd, and Sirius XM is going to play it. And so yeah, it was a big, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. It was, definitely trying to make it sound right and make it, sound like a real album and not sound like some distorted, weird thing that, and we did a good job, and I'm very proud of it. And so, yeah, it's called the Zoom Album 2020, and it's available on iTunes and Amazon. Get it today.
And so what's it going to cost?
I think it's like $8 or something on Amazon, and I think iTunes might be $1 more. I'm not sure how all that works. I just, but you can, it'll be streaming eventually. But if you buy it, it helps the artist a little more. So you can go to iTunes and buy it, and then it'll stream everywhere eventually.
So if we buy it on iTunes, it helps you the most.
Yeah, I think so. I think iTunes is the best for the artist. And that's the thing, is a lot of people just wait to stream stuff, and you're like, you know what? The corporations make all the money. But if when you just wait to stream stuff, so, help the artist out. Buy an album, you cheapies.
I'm going to buy three of them and give 2 away for Christmas.
I like it.
Or Hanukkah in my case.
Very cool. Hanukkah.
That's so cool. Yeah. Did you come from a family where your father was a bit of a wheeler dealer? I think that was part of your.
Yeah.
Mine too.
My dad was a hustler, man. I remember one time he brought home these briefcases full of fake watches. And we were like in 8th grade, and we were selling like these, like in junior high, like we're some guy in a trench coat in Times Square in the 70s. Like, hey, I got watches, And so I remember selling these like fake Gucci watches in like 8th grade and stuff, and like the G would fall off by 3rd period. It was just these crappy, fake Rolexes, like because back in the day, the fake gold to make your arm turn green or whatever. So it's like, just so fake too. But it was, I don't know, so funny. It's like
my
stuff like that.
My dad was so bad. If they had caller ID, if they had caller ID in the 60s, it would have said, every time he dialed, it would have said scam likely. So bad.
Yeah, my dad. Yeah, he used car salesman, and just so he kind of went legit and oh really? That's funny. Yeah, there's a certain kind of person that does that, but he did good for himself. He ended up kind of being a more legit businessman later in his life, but those early years were pretty rough. But
my dad never made it to being legit. I mean, everything. We had to move so many times.
Oh yeah, we did a lot of that. Yeah. That was nothing like moving in the middle of the night. That was.
If they get mad at him, he'd tell us they were anti-Semitic.
Oh, that's funny.
And he used to gamble. Did your dad gamble?
Nah, but I don't think gambling was his thing, but drinking and partying and caught up in that 70s 80s lifestyle for sure. A lot of that, a lot of women and partying and that kind of rock star wannabe stuff.
My dad lied about, how much money he lost. So he'd always come home and tell my mom that he broke even. But that meant that he had to sell all the furniture in the house. So I'm bad at math. I don't blame my dad. What? You broke even, and where's the furniture?
Yeah, you never know what you're going to do. Family.
Damn, but, we love them.
And back to Leah. Yeah, my girlfriend, Leah Bonham, she's a comedian as well. And she wrote a book, and I wrote and produced an album. So that's kind of how we stayed in it. We just we forced ourselves to kind of, just find projects that were going to stimulate us and, kind of put the energy there. So that's kind of what happened.
That's so cool. She wrote a book? I'm trying to get this.
It's like a Christmas book. Yeah, she wrote a Christmas book. It's like a holiday breakdown kind of thing, like a romance Christmas thing or something.
Like a novel?
Yeah, she self-published it on Amazon and stuff. And so, but that was the thing. We both kind of just put our energy in places. And that's what helped us, through the quarantine. And we've been together a long time, like 15 years. So quarantining together was easy. Because we actually like each other, so I feel bad for some couples though. So I think, can you imagine the couple is like, I want a divorce, and the next day it's COVID. Yeah. So they can't leave. But it was, a lot of just cooking in and binge watching stuff like everybody else. And but the projects kind of made us feel like we were doing something with our time. Because we felt like, the more this was kind of clear that we were going to just be in it for a while, we wanted to make the best of our situation. And so that's what we did as a comedy. When two artists are together, it's like, you have to create or you both go crazy. and we're definitely, crazy, but the art, us producing the art, definitely helped, get us through this whole thing.
Yes. Doing these interviews has saved my life.
Oh yeah.
Just listening to other people, how are you coping? What are you working on? What are you trying to do? It's been my lifeline.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's, I have a couple of shows that I do, and I do Dustin's Vinyl, where that was just something that came out through the quarantine. I'm a big avid record collector. I love album vinyls and stuff like that because I don't know, just something about it, just pulling it out of the album cover and putting it on the turntable and listening to the crackle. And I'm a big fan of the vinyl. And so I started doing Instagram shows, where I would just kind of talk about, my records and things. And then it got picked up by Comedy Hub, and it's on Twitch and this whole thing. And so, yeah. And so that's a show that I do as well. And it's also another one of those things where it's just kind of labor of love. And it helps, since I'm not going up every night doing stand up, it's something else that I can do, and it's a passion project, and I get to, interact with people and online and stuff. And, it's like this, you get to, people ask questions. And so, yeah, it's definitely, you have to do something that's just, that's you have to produce content, and you can't just sit there and wait for this thing to be over, because it's not going to be over. And that's the thing too, is like, we all know what this government's about. It doesn't matter what side you like. It's I mean,
Yes.
like we don't know what's going to happen. Vaccine, really? Okay. Let's give me 2 months before I take that, because I want to wait it out a little bit. I want to see who's growing a tail or not. So, I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
they've already switched. Apparently Pfizer's not a good one now. So it's been like a week, you know what I mean? So, so I think we're going to be doing this kind of stuff for a while. So if you're a comic out there and you're not doing this kind of stuff, you really should, because it's like an opportunity to, connect to a fan base and keep yourself sane, just doing something.
Yes. What do you want to do before you pass on? Like, wherever it is you're going after this life, that's a whole nother. But what do you want to do before? I want to know what's the one thing that's eluded you that you have to do.
That's changed over the years. I think actually being in the quarantine, I've thought a little bit about it, and I'm starting to do it, and that's just leave art behind. And that's kind of why I dropped, the album had a little bit to do with that. I felt like you have to leave art. If you want to call yourself an artist, you have to leave art behind, and, things that are tangible, like an album and, a book or whatever. But I want to leave more albums behind. I want to specials and, do some things. But I don't know, it's like, that's a big question. It's like, I hope I'm young enough not to have to think about it that much.
When will Dustin Chafin be on late night?
I've been on late night. The Showtime White Boys in the Hood is my late night. It's like, I don't need those kind of, like, I'm a different kind of comic. And so I'm an edgy guy. I take a lot of risk. And so I don't really have those kind of goals. I don't need 4 minutes on Seth Meyers. Like, I would rather have an hour on HBO or something like that. So that would be a goal. HBO would be a goal way before any late night shows, because I'm an uncensored guy. My stuff's, it's like, that's really not my venue. But that's why it was great. That's why White Boys in the Hood was my first TV thing. What was so great about that is you could say whatever you wanted. You didn't have a producer saying, hey, you can't say this, you can't say that. And it was like, basically, we took the club set right to the TV thing. And to me, that was my late night, because I'm an uncensored guy. So it's like, I don't like, people telling me I have to have a fluffy set or whatever. And I think it's good for some comics, just not for me.
Yeah, it's so much pressure to have a clean set, like, because what is authenticity anyway? And then you have to take out, I don't know, the passion, and not that the word, the thoughts or the words are why people laugh, but a lot of your passion comes from how you really feel.
Yeah, and if Johnny Carson was still alive, then that would be a goal. But you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's not the same anymore. So
it isn't.
There's kids on YouTube that are doing better than somebody that just did 3 late nights. So, it's a whole different, it's a different game now,
It is.
I'm not, not saying it won't happen. It might, but that's not a foreseeable goal.
Yeah. Can you see Johnny Carson? I think Johnny Carson could have rocked the heck out of doing Zoom. But some of these other guys that are on late night, they're
Yeah.
struggling.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, it's a tough thing, I think, the thing is with Zoom, it's like the more intimate, the better. Unfortunately, like a Charlie Rose would do really well with this because it's an intimate experience. A lot of these guys need that crowd, and I get it, and that's something I've had to adjust to as well. Is just like, we get these comedy ears, and so we're used to these laughs and applause breaks, and when you don't get that, it's hard to kind of go about it. And that's how you could tell who's really good at, telling jokes and who's really not. And like, you could tell how Jimmy Kimmel, who's a great talk show host, but you can tell he's not a stand-up. And Seth Meyers, you could tell he's a great Weekend Update guy, but he's not a stand-up. And so the way, because when you have to deliver comedy with no audience, that's when you can tell the difference between a joke teller and not a joke teller. And
Yes.
so that's when there's no audience for you to just buff off of. So no like audience that they pumped up before they got in there, gave free T-shirts and said, "Come on, let's go, everybody." When that's not there, that's gonna tell you how good you are dropping a joke.
And even Jimmy Fallon, holy Toledo, we're seeing how
he's another one. He was kind of more of a musical comic, like played
sketch.
Guitar. Not sketchy, like not traditional, kind of a poor man's Adam Sandler, but not a traditional in the freaking clubs every night doing stand up, that kind of thing. Whereas I feel the best one that I saw in the last few years was Greg Ferguson, who I think is a real stand up. And not that these guys aren't great. They're very, Stephen Colbert, they're all great performers and comedic minds, but I thought Ferguson was great because Ferguson would get up and he would just kind of do a joke on gum or whatever. Like he wouldn't even like do all topical stuff. He would just do a set, and it was so great and refreshing. And it just felt like, it was a comic doing a set, and then he would have an interview show after his set. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed him as a comic.
Me too. I have to tell you that I'm a name dropper, and okay. You dropped the name, so I'm just going to tell you, sure. I have a connection to Craig Ferguson.
Great.
I got hit by a drunk driver in '96 and had brain trauma, and I'm a veteran, and the VA hospital said, "Go heal yourself. It's not bad enough." And it took me, have you ever heard of a brain injured patient healing themselves?
I have it's tough. Yeah.
You have a
well, I have my mother-in-law. Well, she got a bad car accident, so we went through a lot of that stuff. So yeah, familiar with it. Yes.
So it took me 16 years, and I got so good at trivia that I tried out for Meredith Vieira's Who Wants to Be Millionaire. And I got done, and I was standing outside of the ABC studios, and there was a tall guy next to me, and he's on the phone, so I'm like being quiet. Hard to believe, but I was. And he gets off of the phone, and he looks at me, and he goes, "That was my agent," and I don't know him. He says, "That was my agent, and I just got offered late night." It was the day the phone call for him, and he goes, "Do you want my autograph?" And I said, "Oh, I come from a long line of swindlers. You don't want me to know your signature."
Oh, that's fantastic. Very fun.
So, I love him. He was really cool.
That's great. Yeah, that's what I felt. He had kind of you could tell he was a comic, and that's the difference. Comics are a different breed than the average TV personality.
Yes. Remember some of the old people that I say old because I'm so young, but like there's the comedians that had talk shows before Johnny Carson.
Jack Parr, I think, was one.
Yes. He was so good. Like I used to watch it in the 50s, so I'm going back before your time. But I was enamored by the way you can hold a talk show and keep people's interest and ask people questions. From a little kid, I love comedy and the jokes, but I love asking questions.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an art form. Dick Cavett, as I was saying before, I thought he was really good at question, like really one of the best, actually, I think, far as just kind of, and some of the people he interviewed, I mean, Jimi Hendrix and all kinds of, Lennon and just a lot of people, and just, had a way of making them feel comfortable, and kind of they would reveal things they may not reveal on other shows just because of the honesty of a guy like that. They trusted him. And I think that's the thing
Yes.
too, is trust, because it's hard sometimes because people don't trust, comedic personalities because they think we're going to make fun of them or whatever. I thought Steve Allen was good because
I
he was
did.
just, he had such a good energy, and I think people like enjoyed him. And so he was able to kind of get people to say stuff.
He was amazing. Just
Very cool.
amazing. So many great comedians that have come before us. When you went out to do comedy, did you study some of the great, I hate to say it, you guys, but the great Jewish comics that have gone on before us? I mean, that's what I grew up watching.
Yeah, I mean the Jews invented stand up, so yeah, absolutely. The Catskills and all that stuff. The modern stand up comedy as we know it was, kind of through these Henny Youngman types and the Catskill stuff. I'm a big Lenny Bruce guy. That was somebody that I kind of tapped into early on as somebody who loves uncensored comedy. That was somebody that I was drawn to, and yeah, I've studied everybody. I'm one of these people. I've probably read most of the books, of biographies, and there's great books, comedy on the edge, and different stuff. I've read some Catskills stuff, and on Jewish comedy, and just pretty much everything. I could get my hands on. And then that's, because when I first started comedy, I loved it so much. And I just, whatever I could read and absorb that had to do with this particular art I was pursuing, I would just grab it up. And so, yeah, I definitely read all that stuff. And I love a
So
lot of the Jewish comics.
I have to ask you, your comedy is in the smart vein of comedy. It's for a thinking person. It's about
Appreciate that.
social things. So maybe somebody told me this because they don't see me as that kind of comic, but somebody said, don't try to make people think, because when you make them think, they can't laugh. So I don't try to make people think. I guess it's, like for people like you, how do you manage to make people think and make people laugh? Have you ever known
Yeah.
that theory?
Well, you have to be careful, what you take from people. People always say weird things to us when, and we take it. I mean, a lot of times we'll take advice because it's somebody that's doing well, or they're a headliner or on TV or something. And just because they're doing well doesn't mean they know you and your comedy and what you need to do for your path. So you have to be careful of that, first of all. And I don't know. I mean, I just give everything that I feel the comedy gods have given me, and that's what I release on stage. And
That's great.
I enjoy structure. When I tell a joke, I love a good, well-written joke. And when it comes to material, you know, I just try to think of stuff that kind of makes me laugh and what makes me I get into. And so something that kind of affects me like that. I don't really think that much about it. I I think somebody told me one time it's like if you like find yourself yelling at the television like during the news or something, then that's what you should be talking about. Like whatever I feel is passionate that I get revved up by, is usually where I try to do my, whether it be hypocrisy on religion, or the political stuff that's happening, or just people, the hypocrites of people, and how people are just unkind, or whatever it is, whatever revs me up. And it's usually, sometimes that'll kind of like generate material, and I don't think about it as smart or not smart. And that's the thing, is we got to be careful, because I've gone to places that might be like the South per se, and then like people say, oh, those dummies in Oklahoma or Texas or Georgia or Florida, and then sometimes those crowds get me more than the New York crowds, or or Canada or something. So you have to be careful when you think like people don't get things, or they don't want smart comedy, because you'd be surprised. I think a lot of people do actually want jokes that make them think and laugh.
Nowadays, with all the pain, has your comedy changed to be more about getting them to forget what's going on in the world, or to talk about the big white elephant in the room?
Yeah, I mean, with the album, it's like I try to do a little bit of both. I try to kind of like tap into the anxiety that we are kind of going through. And then the other thing was kind of like, here's my journey and sharing my life with people. And so I guess that would kind of be, letting them lose themselves in me for a little while. So that's, and I'm still constantly trying to get better and change and do different things. But yeah, that's kind of how I operate, where it's like I try to touch a little bit with what's happening, and then, but I don't do too much of anything. I would say that I'm a pretty well balanced comedian. Like that's like I try to like, kind of like do a little politics, but not too much. Do a little bit of this, but not too much. A little religion, but not too much. I try to space it out a little bit.
I marvel at what you do with your comedy, because when I was on that show with you at Adam Hunter's, you were making me think, you were making me laugh. Like I just, it got me to my core. And I couldn't believe that you were doing such smart comedy and evoking such a high level of laugh at him.
That must have been just the one of the very few shows where that all happened. Some of those shows have been terrible.
Not that one.
You got a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I love Adam Hunter a lot, so that has a lot to do with it as well. Like he really creates a nice vibe for everybody, and yeah, I mean, and the thing is, just this Zoom thing, you never know what you're gonna get. It's such a walking on the wire kind of thing. Like you don't, we need a place to perform. We need to talk to people that we don't live with or know. Like that we're all addicted to just, being kind of interactive again. And so I think what helps me with these Zoom shows and what helps me is when I just realize that it's like, first of all, the people that are watching it, they need it as bad as the comedians. Like people are starving for some normalcy of entertainment, and at the same time, it's like, if it doesn't go well like you want it to, don't get weird. Don't get affected by, like, still try to enjoy the moment of like having an outlet to perform and you have to be, keep the energy up and the I don't know, the level of just kind of being peppy and fun, and not getting all weirded out when something doesn't work, because you're basically doing comedy to your face. Like you're just looking at yourself. It's like you're trying to. It's so weird. It's like a Twilight Zone episode. You're just like doing comedy to your face. Like it's just weird. And so, or you do to the grid where you see everybody and they're all on their cell phones. So it's like you can't win. Do I do comedy to my face, or do I do comedy to a bunch of people not paying attention? So it's like, you just have to kind of make fun of it a little bit and not take it so serious. And I think that's how I've been able to have good sets online, and which prompted me to make an album and everything. Is just kind of like not giving a shit and just having fun with it.
That's so cool. I love that you have fun. You can feel it coming through the words. Maybe that's where you get people to laugh. You're doing smart comedy, getting big laughs, probably because you're really putting in a lot of feeling, a lot of passion. I mean, there's elements you're putting in. You're not just doing a TED talk and throwing in funny words that make people laugh. There's something that gets them through that to the laugh. I haven't got you figured out yet.
Yeah, and it's hard because a lot of it is brand new. So it's just, how brand new material is. It's like you don't have the confidence behind it yet. You don't there's no place to work it out except this kind of stuff. And so you don't know, if that's, even if it works, even when you tell it and somebody laughs, is that, so it's like, it just doing comedy like this has really been good to me, because if you think about all the guys that are successful, like, people that have done, put out a lot of content, and not talking about their personal lives, but even like a Louis C.K. or people like that, where it's like they just like worked it out. They didn't think it through all the way. A lot of times they just like got up, they had this idea, Dave Chappelle, where they just kind of, they just go off on this thing. And a lot of times it's like they're writing it on stage. Richard Pryor was like that, where he would just kind of find this thing that was a story or an idea, and he would just kind of let the audience kind of guide him with it and kind of play and trust that he was going to find a funny place to take everybody. And so I think we should be using Zoom like that a little bit more and just letting it kind of happen and not, like I said, not be so serious about it.
So you were talking about the things that you yell at the TV, and I don't yell at the TV, but
It's been a while. I don't as much as I used to. My father-in-law, boy, he does.
does he?
He gets revved up.
The things that cause me the most hurt or pain, I like turning them into jokes because then I feel like I won. Are you
Mm.
that way?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, it's like I did a joke on my album where it was, I was talking about my father died last year, and I spent some time with him in the hospice, and kind of like was his caretaker and wiped him down, took him to the bathroom, it was all stuff. And we didn't get along for a lot of my life. And we argued about religion and politics. And, it's amazing how that'll all go out the window when you're holding your dad's dick in your hand, helping him go pee pee, so it's like maybe Reagan did have some good ideas. And then it's like you find a place that's ridiculous and it's like this heart wrenching thing. And then it's like, but it's like, here I am. It's like, how are we ever going to be mad at each other ever again? I'm like, you helped me do this. Now I'm helping you do this. And it's like, let's let everything go. And it was such a moment for me.
Still laughing about
Reagan and, the dad, the dying stuff, you can find humor in anything. And that's a very difficult topic to find to get a laugh out of. But I found a way. To me, it makes me laugh because I was helping him and stuff. And then I said, oh my God, I mean, we fought about stupid shit for so long. For what? It's look where we are right now.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so that's kind of, that's an example of something that was painful. And I was able to find humor in it and find the light in the darkness of something that, and it helped me kind of get over whatever I had with my father, whatever, this father-son bullshit that we had. I was able to get through that by, finding a funny place to talk about it. And so that's the example, kind of like what you were saying with your pain. That's, and I do that as well.
So the worst pain I've ever had in my life is the fact that I'm Jewish and my parents went through the Holocaust and people don't believe that the Holocaust existed. So now it's my opening line. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
I have great news for you. God damn it. Laughing at my own jokes is so stupid. Okay, I have great news for you. My parents survived the Holocaust. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, don't feel bad. I don't want the air to leave the room. It was the Holocaust that did exist. You're not really laughing, but I love it.
I'm laughing. I'm a comic. We don't, how we laugh.
I just love saying it because it's like, I feel like I'm addressing my pain. I'm letting them know I'm crazy. And I'm also making a statement, if they're not laughing, maybe they should leave right now.
Yeah. I mean, we all have our, stuff. It's like, my grandfather was Native American and died and lived his whole life on a reservation. And, I feel like I'm constantly, trying to convince people that I'm Native and stuff. And it's like, and that's always a struggle. And you're just like, what do I have to do? Like, I don't, I'm not Elizabeth Warren, it's like, well, how do I have to get, do I need to wear like an elk's head on my head? Like with no shirt on? Like what's the last time I think we're really Indian, it didn't work out. So, it's this thing where, yeah, people are always weird about your heritage. I feel like we're always trying to defend and make people believe things. And I'm just like, ugh, I'm so over that.
Yeah, I get it. Well, gosh, you've been a delight to get to know and to get to interview.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
All to myself. I hope somebody watches. And when I leave here, I'm going to type my afterthoughts about you.
Oh, great.
And post all your stuff that you sent me to it. And so I'd love it if you would share it and say, I survived it.
Absolutely.
It wasn't that bad. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What is that? What is that hanging behind you? A tablecloth?
Yeah, my girl did a Christmas show. She did like a Zoom Christmas show, and so this was her backdrop, and so I didn't have the energy
Love
to
it.
take it down.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Tell her hi. I'd love to
I will.
interview her too if she has the patience.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. It was a lot of
Thank you.
fun.
Love
Appreciate you. Bye,
you.
Linda.
See you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.